I am beyond excited about AI. It's going to touch absolutely everything, every industry, every function, every person in a way that is an order of magnitude more than the internet. So think about that. There are many founders that have a great idea, but they struggle to fundraise because they're not good at transferring the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
There are equally other founders that have a so-so idea, but they're amazing at transferring the enthusiasm. 5 years ago, it was blockchain and everything about that, and I was going down that rabbit hole. Of course, now it's AI and humanoid robotics, and then it's going to be this, and then it's going to be that. Like, as long as I'm going to be alive, this world of technology and innovation is all about renewal and new things. And so the learner in me is going to be fed as long as my brain is able to keep working.
Welcome to The Show Goes On, a podcast about the people who keep businesses running no matter the challenges. My name is Amir Noorani, and today I'm joined by Gordon Daugherty. Gordon Daugherty is a best-selling author, seasoned executive, and startup advisor with deep expertise in fundraising and scaling. As co-founder and chairman of Capital Factory and founder of Shockwave Innovations, he has made over 500 investments and helped raise more than $200 million in venture capital. His book, Startup Success, is a go-to resource for founders, and his advisory work has impacted thousands of entrepreneurs through articles, videos, and mentorship. With a background at IBM, Compaq, and high-growth startups, Gordon has led companies through IPO, acquisitions, and rapid scaling. Most recently, Gordon has been involved with Apptronik, an Austin-based robotics company building the next generation of humanoid robots. Gordon, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So when people ask what you do, and you've done a lot, how do you usually answer?
Well, it's some version of telling them I'm having the time of my life. I've found myself in a place where I'm working because I want to, not because I have to, and I've chosen to allocate almost all that time educating and advising and investing in tech startups, which is an ever-changing world. So who wouldn't want to be a part of that and that continued discovery and learning that I get to be a part of?
Yeah. How did this all start for you?
Well, if you go back 100 years ago or so, when I got my computer science degree, actually it goes before that, when I was in high school, my sophomore year in high school before you were born. A personal computer showed up in my math class, and as my hands hit that keyboard, I literally fell in love and knew that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So I got a computer science degree, went to work for IBM, not programming, actually immediately went into enterprise sales for IBM, and from there embarked on a 30-plus year career in high tech, and that got me into investing and advising. But it started out by falling in love with the computer and deciding that I was going to be a part of something related to technology for the rest of my life.
All right. And you talked about how during your career, you did lots of zigging and zagging. You went from companies that, were doing 15 billion in sales and then 100 million, 10 million, and then sometimes total startup, just zero. Talk to me about that, the zigging and zagging and everything you learned along the way.
Yeah. It is an important part of my personal journey. Everybody has their journey. We're not really allowed to rewind and do it again and go down different forks of the road. I'd love to do that if I could. But the one that I took worked out very well for me. When I was at IBM, I mentioned I was in sales, but I didn't want to be a career salesperson. I enjoyed it for a while. I was pretty good at it, but my boss's boss at IBM asked me a question along the lines of, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was 22 years old or something. And I told him I wanted to be CEO of a company or maybe serve on the board of directors. That was what was in my 22-year-old brain in terms of what I wanted to be when I grew up. He said, "Oh, so you don't want to be IBM's global executive vice president of sales someday?" I said, no, actually, I didn't really want to go into sales. I've enjoyed it. I think I'm good at it. But no, I don't really want a career in sales. He goes, if you want to be the CEO of a company, you should probably understand how a company operates, in different disciplines, different functions. So, and he is the one that used the words. So, Gordon, as you get promoted here at IBM, you should zig and zag. So, when you're ready for promotion, we should not promote you to what we would normally do if you wanted to say in the sales career path. We should look for something in marketing or product or finance or whatever. As it turns out a finance role opened up. I moved into finance with little to no knowledge of finance. There's a reason for that. It wasn't like hardcore accounting type finance. It was
Mhm.
a finance role within the sales organization. And from there, I zagged over into marketing at Compaq and then into product management. And so my zig and zag had multiple dimensions. One was moving through the different functions inside of a company and then combining them and running multiple at a time. And then the other dimension of zig and zag had to do with company size. It actually started really big and then smaller, smaller, smaller until I reached zero. And then I worked my way back up a little bit. And then same for type of products, hardware versus software versus semiconductor, and same for, target industries and things. And so there's 3 or 4 different dimensions of zigging and zagging that I realize now was not just amazing for my own personal discovery and learning, but now as a startup advisor, as an investor, as a mentor, I just have a lot more aperture or surface area with which I can draw upon from experience to help founders. And that's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, you talked about how like in a startup you're wearing multiple hats, and it seems like you're able to take that uh, something that usually happens to a startup founder and do that throughout corporate America, where you're on marketing and then finance and then sales, and then you had all that experience as you kept on going down the ladder in terms of revenue.
It's exactly true. And strangely enough, the one function that I have never operated in or overseen in my career is research and development. So I have that computer science degree, so you could say I have some aptitude in coding,
Hmm.
but I never did it in the business world. So although I have technical aptitude, I don't know what it means to check in code and do code reviews. And so I wasn't part of a formal, research and development function. And so strangely enough, even though that's my degree, it's the area that I probably have the least experience from an operator's perspective.
Interesting. So, when you were climbing down all these companies, was that something you were telling yourself? Was that something you were very intentional about? As just going to companies that were a little bit smaller, or did it kind of just turn out that way?
The first 2 moves were not planned out. When I left IBM and went to Compaq, you could say they were in similar industries. Compaq was the big up and comer, shiny object in personal computers and personal computer servers. This was the middle of the 1990s. And it just so happened they were much smaller than IBM. Instead of 70,000 employees, they were, I think, maybe 15,000. So still a big company, but to me, a lot smaller. I worked in the headquarters, so there were 13 or 14 buildings. So I got to kind of see the operations, and I really enjoyed getting that level of visibility and the faster moving pace and influence that I had. The next move was to a $100 million company, and that was not planned. It was because a former boss of mine had gone to the company and he pulled me out of Compaq into this company. And each time, those first 2 times that I went to smaller and smaller, I liked it more. I liked the fast moving pace. I liked the visibility that I had into the organization and all of its working parts, and the ability for me to take an action and actually see the result of that action. In IBM, I might close a $5 million deal. It wouldn't even show up 2 digits to the right of the decimal point on their earnings.
Yeah.
But at the $100 million company, if I landed a strategic partnership, the CEO knew about it. And so after that, that's when I finally realized, wow, I'm liking this going this direction. So if I have an opportunity next, it's probably even smaller versus going larger.
Sounded like you're really enjoying being part of that energy where everyone kind of knows what's going on and
Exactly.
being recognized. Yeah. So let's just jump straight to Capital Factory. How did that come about then? Because it sounds like you started to grow an affinity and a love for startups.
What happened is My fourth or fifth company was a very small one, just a couple million, few million in revenue. We were in the video conferencing industry. We ended up taking the company public and then sold it. Along the way, some of the employees left our company. I was president of the company. They left and started a startup, and then very quickly were debating amongst themselves which product they were actually going to go build. It turns out they had three or four ideas, and they came back to me as the president of their previous company and asked if I would be their advisor. So I agreed, and I really enjoyed it. They were working on something different. I was able to live a little bit vicariously through them and exercise some things in my brain that I enjoyed, but without having to actually run the company. I could run my company, but help them, and I could learn. I learned about the technology they were going to build and the industry they were targeting. And I had such an amazing experience that year and a half or 2 years that I decided I'm gonna keep that going. Like I can run a company or help run a company and still advise maybe one or two startups. I said, I think I'm gonna do that. And if I ever get to a point where I don't need to be on the payroll of a company, I'm just gonna do that. And so that was my strategy for the next dozen years or so. That's what I did. And then in 2009, a company that I helped grow was acquired by a Fortune 500. I went over to the Fortune 500 and stayed a lot longer than I intended. I wasn't looking to work for a Fortune 500, but they gave me an interesting role and gave me some autonomy. Um, and as that worked its course, after about 4 years, I started navigating my escape. And as part of my escape, I knew what I wanted to do was just help startup founders build great companies. And that was at the same time that Joshua Bear, my co-founder, the founder of Capital Factory and still the CEO, decided he wanted to build the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Austin. And he called it Capital Factory. He had signed the lease of a floor in a building in downtown Austin. This is before there were any co-working spaces in downtown Austin and before there were any accelerator programs in downtown Austin. So he built that and kind of got it started. But while it was being constructed, I invested in a startup that he also had invested in, and that triggered a meeting between us. He told me what he was up to. I told him what I was wanting to do after I navigated my escape of the Fortune 500. And I guess you could say we fell in love with each other, and we've been with each other for about 13 years now.
Amazing. Yeah, it kind of feels like it probably just aligned once he told you what he was working on and what you truly wanted to do.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're very different people in our skills, in our personalities, in our approaches. And both of us were mature enough to realize that actually that's a superpower, not a negative thing. Thinking and operating differently and bringing different skills and perspectives to the table is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, you talked about failures for a startup, and you said, one of the failure points for a startup is partnerships, right? When it's a bad partnership. So, what makes yours and Joshua's partnership so successful?
Well, there are lots of similarities between co-founders and let's say married couples or serious partners in that type of a relationship. And one of the things that makes a successful personal partnership, like a marriage, is learning how to debate and argue, including arguing very important matters, like
Mhm.
really critical for a couple, married couple. It might be the way the children are raised and some of the core principles and values and those kind of things. Um, and being able to debate and argue those things without destroying the relationship.
Mhm.
And I tell founders this a lot. I'll say, look, my wife and I have been married, 32 years. Doesn't mean we don't argue. Yes, of course we still argue, but we've learned how to argue without destroying our marriage.
Mhm.
So you two co-founders or three co-founders, you're going to have lots of arguments, including ones where you're yelling at each other. Like one of you might have spit coming out of your mouth. You're yelling so loud, and that's okay. It's only okay though if you all learn how to turn that into, an agreed direction, and you don't make it personal. You're debating important matters of the company. This is something I learned when I worked for an Israeli startup, and part of their culture is the ability to argue and criticize an idea. And that doesn't mean you are criticizing the person.
Hmm.
I literally had a low level employee, I was president, that said, Gordon, that idea is a ridiculous idea that is never going to work. It's going to fail miserably. He said something like that. As an American and as an executive, I didn't know how to process that. I was like, you just called me an idiot. And it took me a little while. It took me multiple meetings realizing this is happening for me to understand they were criticizing the idea
Hmm.
and not the person. And I found it very liberating. So it's these kind of principles that I think can allow founders to have critical and difficult arguments, but still be successful.
Yeah, I love that. Debating on the merits of an idea rather than, a personal attack on the person. And it also requires like a great level of humility.
It
So,
does. Absolutely, it does. Yep.
yeah. You said one of the things that drives you is learning, and you're a very curious person. I'm curious. Where did that love of learning come from throughout your life?
It's actually something I didn't know about myself until I read the book and took the online assessment, now called StrengthsFinder 2.0. I participated in the predecessor of that called Now Discover Your Strengths, but the current book and the online assessment is called StrengthsFinder 2.0. And the assessment helps you understand and identify your core strengths, not skills.
Hmm.
Skills can be developed. If you practice long enough, you can shoot 9 out of 10 free throws in a row and spin the basketball on your finger. That's a skill. A strength is more ingrained. It's almost more like personality. You can't change your personality. You can fake it for a while, but like your inner personality is more core and fundamental. And so strengths are like that. And it was that assessment that helped me realize my number one strength was learner. It's like, interesting. What does learner mean? What do learners do? How do learners operate? And it was one of these mind blowing things as I read the 3 or 5 paragraphs that describe the attributes of a learner. It was like, it was me.
That's
Just
me.
one of those revelations, like, my God. And learners, once they mostly master something, and if they mostly master it or master it, meaning, with a learning curve, right? A learning curve,
Yeah.
there's like, well, it's like that, and then it starts tapering off. And then you get to almost an expert, and there is a little bit more, but like, man, that last 2%
Hmm.
might take you a lifetime, right? So as I started to approach that, I would get bored. I'm like, okay, I now know as much as I ever thought I might want to know about whatever. And I just hit the reset button and jump into something new. And I had enough evidence of that up until that time that I realized it was true. This is also, think about it. This was the zigging and zagging why I loved it so much.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it's still an important part of me today. And being a startup advisor and mentor and investor, holy crap. I mean, there is one thing about innovation, which is it's always new forming. I mean, just 5 years ago, it was blockchain and everything about that. And I was going down that rabbit hole. Of course, now it's AI and humanoid robotics. And then it's going to be this and then it's going to be that. Like, as long as I'm going to be alive, this world of technology and innovation is all about renewal and new things. And so the learner in me is going to be fed as long as my brain is able to keep working.
Right, right. And like you said, you're at the center of gravity for all of it. And you're surrounded by entrepreneurs who are trying to innovate. And so sure every day you're getting exposed to more and more information.
I talk about the tip of the spear when I meet with corporate executives and usually the head of their innovation, function or innovation initiative. I talk to them about how in this day and age, from the tip of the spear of an innovation to mainstream, it used to be years,
Hmm.
several years. Now it's collapsed
Yeah.
so much. that from tip of the spear to mainstream happens so fast that these corporate executives and the corporations they work for are getting punched in the face,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
And then I jokingly say, I, through my role at Capital Factory, live at the tip of the spear
Hmm.
every day. That's where I am. And some of the founders are working on things that will not move as fast, but many of them are. So living at the tip of the spear is the place you want to be if you're a learner.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. You did an interview in August of 2022, and you had said AI will change everything. 3 months later, ChatGPT came out.
Mm,
And I feel like that was one of those inflection points that we're all going to look back on.
for sure.
Kind of made AI mainstream, if you will.
They did.
So I'm curious, what excites you right now?
I mean, I am beyond excited about AI. I'm old enough to have executed and operated through the internet. I mean, obviously, you see lots, everybody draws the parallels. Um, I see it because, I lived through it, an enabling technology capability that isn't just about one thing or another. And in the earlier days of the internet, we thought we kind of understood what it was, but it wasn't until we kind of moved into it and really opened our mind that really we exercised the capabilities.
Yeah.
I see so many parallels with AI, and everybody's giddy with excitement about having ChatGPT write a poem for their, son or daughter on their birthday, or give me this or give me that. But just allowing our minds to discover and explore what's possible and being progressively unlocked. And, at my age and because of my logical and analytical nature of thinking, I really have to work to be as open minded as I need to be to fully understand the capabilities of AI. But I just know, like the internet, it's going to touch absolutely everything,
Hmm.
every industry, every function, every person in a way that is an order of magnitude more than the internet. And it's the not knowing the full potential of that that's driving me crazy in a good way. And on the one hand, I'd love to just fast forward 10 or 20 years to just see where it starts to land. But then that would mean I miss all of the aha, mind blowing moments between now and then. So I have no choice but to actually just live it every day, every week for the next 10 or 20 years. I have three grandchildren, ages 3 to 9. And so I can't also help but think about AI, not just in the way it's going to affect my life. It will be the thing that enables me to live a healthy life to 110, maybe 120. And I don't even say that with much of a stretch. I'm 59. So I've already told my kids and grandkids, hey guys, like, I'm going to live till 110 or 120. You're probably stuck with me for that long. And then I look at them, my two daughters that have kids, and I say, I don't know how long you're going to live, but your children, my grandchildren, uh, it's not inconceivable to me that they don't have an end of life. And I don't know what that means. And I know it sounds crazy, but
Hmm.
they're only 3 years old and 9 years old. And a lot of shit is going to happen in the next 50, 60, 100 years. And I said, so yeah, I'm giving you just some flavor of it. And
Yeah.
of course, I'm involved in a humanoid robotics startup. I'm also involved in a software as a medical device startup that is going to have the world's first diagnostic, the first numerical measure of mental health, like anxiety, depression,
Wow.
schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, PTSD. And just those two examples alone are just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, so tell us about Abtronic. That's what you were talking about, the robotics company that you're involved in.
Mhm.
Very curious about that.
I've been on the journey with them for the last 6 years. They started before that at the University of Texas in a research capacity, inventing some amazing technology, components, if you will, important subsystem that is necessary to build a humanoid robot. And what's been so amazing about that is it's only been recent that the world has woken up to and embraced the possibilities and likelihood that humanoid robots will be part of our work experience and our, everyday lives. People would debate as to how fast it's going to happen, how long is it going to be before we have, millions of them, and then billions of them. Fine. But the humanoid robotics industry's also kind of had its chat GPT moment, right? And I think most people now versus 2 years ago would say, well, yeah, these humanoids, they're going to be a thing. And I either like it or I don't like it. I mean, there's certain debates, to have about that. But as a technologist, I know it's going to be a very important part of our business and human lives. Working with the founders on the journey just to get to the point where investors would even kind of be interested to now, you've learned that they raised more than $400 million in a Series A,
That's insane.
403 million Series A.
Wow.
It's mind blowing. A year and a half ago, most VCs wouldn't even really talk to the company, right? So, yeah, the journey and being in the trenches with the founders has been amazing. I've been able to learn a lot about humanoids as a technology. I've been able to learn a lot about the potential use cases of them, filling the labor gap initially, potentially being the thing that enables you and me to actually spend our days doing whatever the fuck we want to do.
Hmm.
The concept of a job is going to be very different, not just because of AI software, but because of embodied AI doing things that we don't really want to do, but there's certain people that have to do it. Lots of ethical questions, lots of is it gonna, is it gonna put everybody out of work, and how do our economies work? How does our political process work? I mean, there's a million things that are going to have to be figured out. It's not going to be just smooth, easy sailing.
Yeah.
But I'm an optimist by nature. I think most technologists are optimists. And so, like every technology, there's the good and the bad. The internet had it, has had it, and does have it. I mean, look at all the things we enjoy from the internet.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
those same things mean that my 9-year-old granddaughter, if she were to get into my phone, is like 8 clicks away from seeing things on my phone that we would rather her not see, right?
Yeah.
The internet enabled that, and that's not a good thing.
Hmm.
AI is going to do the same thing. Humanoid robotics are going to do the same thing. This is something about technology that we can't avoid, but I'm kind of like in the 70-30 camp. 70% amazingness
Gonna be good.
you have to put up with and somehow tolerate, contain, limit the 30% badness. And that'll be the case with humanoids. But the rest of it, I'm just enjoying the journey.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And what can you share with someone who hasn't really seen one of these robots? Like, just how good are they? Like, what's gonna happen? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I can describe what it will be in just a short year or two. Like right now, of course, you've seen videos of humanoids walking, picking up objects, moving them around. That's already evolved into some basic reasoning. So, hey, pick up the fruit. There's items on a table and there's different containers. Hey, pick up a piece of fruit and put it in my lunch basket. Okay. And so it has different objects, but it discerns the fruit and it has multiple places it can put it, but understands what your lunchbox is, right? So that's some basic reasoning. And then moving on to where it can perform a task where you don't have to be specific with it, okay? Um, there's a loose bolt on that joist over there. Can you go tighten it? You and I, as a human, would know to go evaluate the bolts, find the one that's loose, go get a crescent wrench, adjust the crescent wrench, and tighten it until it's about tight. We're evolving to a point where a humanoid would also, with that same basic instruction, and so evolving to where being less and less prescriptive and more in the way that I might ask you as an employee or you as a coworker, you as a family member to do something is an amazing next level of evolution. And so the humanoids will probably start out in warehouse and
Okay.
logistics and manufacturing environments, moving things around, packing things, unpacking things, uh, then move on to more dexterous tasks, things that might relate to construction, using tools. Initially kind of crude tools and then evolving into, drills and more tools that require dexterity. Um, and then just like keep playing that out into where there's a point in which a humanoid might actually be a home healthcare worker for your grandmother that unfortunately is of an age and a health condition to still be able to live in her home, but maybe has difficulty getting on and off the toilet, maybe has difficulty getting in and out of bed, needs a little bit of help with some cooking and light items. Maybe would love to own a dog, but is not able to walk the dog and doesn't want a drone to walk her dog, but instead would entrust her robot home healthcare worker to also put a leash on the dog and take the dog out to go to the bathroom in the backyard that doesn't have a fence and maybe take it for a walk around the block. So I've just painted kind of an evolution of tasks, and then you can just imagine everything in between and just the potential value and contribution to our economies and our personal lives.
Yeah. I guess folding laundry is like a no-brainer now. That's going to happen no matter what.
There you go. Cleaning up after the party. Yeah, all the crap that we don't want to do,
Oh
right?
yeah. Um, you've said something before about survival, and I'll quote this: "When faced with fear, run through the fire because survival kicks in." Um, I would love to hear a story about one of those moments in your life where that survival instinct kicked in and you told yourself, "Hey, I'm going to run through that fire."
Well, this came as a result of me discovering that fear was one of my important personal emotions. I
Hmm.
mean, everybody has fear at certain levels. I didn't have fear of going outside. I didn't have fear of it wasn't that type of a fear, but I'm reasonably conservative by nature, not a big risk taker by nature. And earlier in my career, if faced with two or three or four opportunities, I might have tended to go for the one that was a little more safe as opposed to engage in the one that's more risky.
Hmm.
And, of course, that translates to some element of a fear factor. And there was a time when I went from the $100 million company to the $5 million company, and that was a pretty big jump. It was the one headquartered in Israel. I had not worked for a foreign headquartered company. There was a lot that needed to be done that was not in place, and it was a little scary for me. And it was only because my boss and I were both recruited at the same time, and he was ready to go do it. And in my mind, I was like, okay, he's going to do it. Screw it. Let's just do it. Right. And it was after that I came up with this analogy of running through the fire. It was kind of like, okay, I realized what just happened is I had a fear factor. And as soon as I made the decision and committed, it didn't take any time for me then to have my, let's call it survival instincts take over and just kind of figure things out. And then it became amazingly exciting. So I realized once I get on the other side of this fire line, now I'm committed and other skills that I have kick in, and that's very rewarding.
Hmm.
So that's where I came up with the analogy of, when faced with a fire line on a decision, maybe I should just run through it. Because if I run through the fire, my clothes aren't gonna catch on fire. If I go through fast enough, I can just get through it, and then I'm on the other side, and amazing things are probably gonna happen. And it's interesting that from that moment forward, the co-founders that I worked with or the CEOs that I worked for were of the type that created kind of the chaos or the fire that I needed to run through, including with Josh Bear at Capital Factory. I mean, he is a quintessential entrepreneur. I mean, he just moves fast and he moves with instinct. And sometimes that was scary to me. Sometimes that was frustrating to me. But I had been through this enough to realize you know what? Just let him knock down the wall. And then once he's knocked down the wall, there's nothing I can do about it. So let's just go into that other room and see what amazing things are there and what we could do with it. So I've just always then partnered with these other types that are the types to knock down walls and create the fire lines that I get to run through. Is kind of that's the analogy.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's once you start breaking down the walls, you begin to see that on the other side of fear, it's nothing. It just is. And the more you keep doing that, sure, the brain gets healthier and it's able to, exercise that ability to keep doing that again and
For
again.
people like me, not everybody has the fear factor that I had. Some are the ones that knock down the walls. So this is a little bit more for those that tend to be more conservative, tend to be more calculated, but actually they enjoy when they are in a more high risk, uncertain environment. They just don't know how to get there. So it's this message, this analogy is for those types more than the other types.
Okay. Okay, so then let's look at the other side of the equation then. There are some people out there who are more risk adverse and let's say they're entering into the startup world. Um, how would you recommend they manage their risk if they're not like the fear factor type who wants to break down walls?
This is where having a diverse team of personas is so valuable. An article that I wrote years ago titled The Eight Personas of Successful Entrepreneurs tried to kind of dig underneath that and say that there is not one persona that is perfect for being an entrepreneur. Like everybody talks about the hacker or the hustler and the hacker hustler duo, like, hacker hustler duo. Like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of hacker hustler duos, and that's great. I mean, a hacker hustler duo is better than a hacker hacker duo
Hmm.
or a hustler hustler duo. Like, when you have two or three personas that are the same as co-founders, I'm going to predict a higher odds of crashing and burning just because they all think alike.
Yeah.
But if we start to mix and match them, and I identified six others beyond just the hacker and hustler, that I think could equally complement each other. And part of the articles was to identify them. The other part was to define the greatest complements between them. Okay. If you're an explorer, you might partner best with a visionary or
Hmm.
maybe a conservative. This whole article, it took me about 2 years to write, not because I was a slow writer, but because I wanted to think about it. I didn't do a lot of traditional research. It's not grounded in research, but I would say to this founder that has a fear factor, join up with someone else that doesn't have the fear factor. And then find the third one, like build a three-legged stool as quick as you can with these complementary skills. And in this way, each of them will pull the others a little bit in one direction, but without overpowering.
Yeah.
And so it can provide an amazing balance and superpower.
Yeah. No, I love that. Finding people around you to kind of complement the skills that you have.
Skills and deficiencies and personality traits and all those other things.
Yeah. So one of the other skills that's super important for any startup is sales. And
Mhm.
you've said before, effective sales requires a transfer of enthusiasm from
Mhm.
salesperson to customer. Where did that line come from? Because I absolutely loved it. I was like, wow, that is sales. Yes.
Yeah. I don't think I can take credit for inventing it. I think the transfer of enthusiasm piece I might have learned in my IBM sales training or read it somewhere. This concept of sales is really a transfer of enthusiasm. So I think that part had been written by someone else. I think I probably then added the statement, from the seller to the buyer, and then I moved it into the context of a startup founder, right?
Mhm.
But then I also talk about it in context of fundraising for a founder. So I took this transfer of enthusiasm concept over into the startup world, and then I further adapted it to fundraising. That successful fundraising requires a transfer of enthusiasm from the founder to the investor. Because fundraising is a sales process. What am I selling? I am selling the opportunity for you to make a bunch of money by investing in me and my business plan. So it is a sale is happening.
Mhm.
It's just we don't call it a sale, but it follows a lot of the sales processes. And because of that, it also requires a transfer of enthusiasm. So think about that. There are many founders that have a great idea, but they struggle to fundraise because they're not good at transferring the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
There are equally other founders that have a so-so idea, but they're amazing at transferring the enthusiasm.
Hmm.
I happen to be watching the streaming series We Crashed about the
Oh,
WeWork.
I knew you were going to bring that up. Yeah, I was literally thinking about that. Yeah.
Is Adam
That's enthusiasm. Yeah.
capable of transferring
Oh,
enthusiasm?
he could sell
I,
anything. Yeah.
oh my God. So, and this is a fundamental truth that I sometimes have to break the news to the founder. Like, look, you have a great idea. You just are not good at sales and you are not good at transferring your enthusiasm, and the investor's not feeling it, not getting it. And I tell them, in order to successfully do that, you're going to need to feel uncomfortable until actually it becomes normal for you. I'm on stage a lot. I've been on stage so many times giving lectures and keynotes and things that it's natural for me to get into a certain mode and animation and excitement and transfer that. That's not my natural state. I'm naturally an introvert that loves to just kind of stare into my computer screen and do things. But I have learned over time, after becoming uncomfortable on stage, because I felt like I was just being I don't know, my arms are flailing. I'm kind of acting and like, this is bullshit. This is not really you. This doesn't, but people would, wow, that was great. And I would watch myself on video like, that's weird. I don't know how I did that, but it comes across pretty good. You just do that enough that that becomes part of a personality that you can turn on. Founders have to, if they don't inherently have that, they better figure that out very quickly. Otherwise, they're just not going to transfer the enthusiasm. They're not going to raise as much funding as they're going to need to. And that same enthusiasm transfer is required when you're recruiting talent to come work for your company for free or half of the salary that they otherwise would get. The same for your first customers. Like, that is a very fundamental thing that founders either have, or if they don't have it, they better learn it very quickly.
Yeah, this feels like one of those moments where you kind of just have to kick down the door and get over that fear and run through that fire and
Yes,
that the idea of like speaking on stage and getting over that fear of
that's right.
public speaking.
In a pitch practice, when I would detect this, I'd say, okay, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're not gonna go through slide by slide and what should you say. I'm gonna just let's pick a slide, and I want you to turn the enthusiasm factor to 11. And I
Mm.
want you to get so ridiculous. I don't care how loud you talk or shout, whatever to you. I want it to just be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Pretend like you're a freaking used car salesman doing a commercial on NBC. You know those ridiculous
Oh
ones?
yeah.
The cowboy hat and the whatever, and they're riding on a cattle and doing something stupid. I want you to do something stupid and funny. Pretend like this is just like a joke, okay? And I have them do it a few times. Like, okay, now that was silly. You were on 11. You're allowed to dial it down a little bit, but I get them out of being on 1 to 3, and
Hmm.
I get them way over here so that. And then we would just practice it. Like, nope, you're going to practice it like you're on stage. I want you to just get animated. I want to see your arm movement. I want to see voice inflections. And so we would practice and practice and practice in this enthusiastic transfer mode. So then when they get on stage, that's the way they practiced it. And here it goes. And presumably good things happen. And then they got it
Yeah, and then everyone across them can feel the enthusiasm. It's kind of oozing out of them then.
completely.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 2025 right now. In 2030, where do you and Joshua see Capital Factory? I'm curious what your vision is for the next 5 years.
It's funny. It's a question that we've been asked like every year since this journey. And we usually have to admit that we don't have a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan, much less even really a 1 or 2 year plan. Of course, we know what we're trying to accomplish this
Mhm.
year. I mean, the fundamental vision is helping founders build great companies, and the way that manifests itself can change a little bit over time. One of the big ones was expanding across Texas, meaning beyond just Austin, and taking advantage of the wonderful things that exist around Texas. now doing something similar in Washington, D.C., with all of our activities with the Department of Defense and the innovation units inside of the Army and the Air Force and the Navy and these other units. It doesn't have to do with helping them build weapon systems. It's related to everything else, healthcare and training and logistics and housing and all the things they need to do. So I could say one of the themes in the near-ish term is taking that to next levels, which is building connection points in Washington, D.C. That's our first time to really move outside of Texas. That'll keep us kind of busy. I would say another evolution that I believe will be with us for 5 years has been movement towards deep tech beyond simple software. And I mean, we had many years of enterprise software and B2C mobile app software, but deep tech is an important trend to our country. It's been something we've gotten really good at. We've built a lot of resources. We've found investors. Our DoD partners love giving grant money to deep tech, startups. So I definitely see a continuation of our strategy around deep tech. Beyond that, to be honest with you, I have enjoyed not really having much more of a rigid plan than that because it allows us to react and respond like any good entrepreneur should. And it's even kind of part of the fun. Like, I don't know, I can kind of see the next year or two playing out. Wow, year 3, 4, 5. Man, I don't know what's going to come our way, but it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and with everything changing so fast, it almost feels like a 3 or 5 year plan is a little outdated now because
Exactly.
you can take that paper and like rip it up in the next year based on just things changing.
And that's why being grounded in remaining the center of gravity for entrepreneurs. It was in Austin, then it was in Texas. Now it's not just Texas, but we still want to be a center of gravity. When you're a center of gravity, you have a multitude, a majority of resources that founders need to build a great company. They need money, customers, and talent. They need mentorship and advice along the way. So that stays true regardless of what comes our way in 3 to 5 years, and with the mission of helping founders build great companies. That's the other thing. What is the definition of a great company? It doesn't have to be a multi-unicorn to be considered a great company. It can be a company of 10 or 20 or $30 million in revenue that is doing something very important for society, has really happy customers, really enthusiastic employees that love working for the company. Wow, if we can help a founder achieve that, that's also a great company.
Yeah.
So being the center of gravity for entrepreneurs and with a mission of helping founders build great companies, that can stay true for the next 5 or 15 or 25 years of Capital Factory's evolution. That's what gets me excited.
I absolutely love that. Yeah. So we'll end with some rapid fire questions, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Okay. And I know this is tough, but you're based out of Austin, Texas. So I want to know what your favorite restaurant is in Austin.
Maybe Chewy's Tex-Mex.
Okay. Chewy's is awesome. I love chips and salsa. So, um, how about your favorite city to visit beyond Austin, of course?
Mm, Madrid, Spain.
Okay. And then what's your favorite health hack right now? You've talked about, wanting to live towards 110, 120. What's something that you're doing right now for your health that it's like, hey, everyone should probably be doing this?
I don't know about everybody, but mine is I work out every day.
Yeah.
I'll
Daily.
say virtually every day. 19 out of 20 days I work out. I do different things, but I work out virtually every day.
What's your favorite type of workout? What's something that you keep coming back to?
Well, my mix currently is majority weightlifting, light weights, high repetitions, rotate around muscle groups, intermixed every week. I do yoga and I swim. I was a competitive swimmer for much of my life and competed even
Oh,
into my 50s, and I'm thinking about competing again. So I swim, I do yoga, but a majority of the days I lift weights.
that's awesome. And I feel like swimming and yoga are both so great for your joints too, and almost counterbalance all the weight work
It's the
too.
kind of, the great thing about it is I can do it until I'm 80 or 100. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to swim and not fast, but still be able to swim and still be able to do something that resembles yoga when I'm 80 or 100. The weightlifting might need to take on a different form. That probably declines over time to some degree. But yeah, that's my health hack.
Awesome. Well, Gordon, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a lot of fun, absolutely incredible. You're a legend in the Texas entrepreneur community, so I'm really glad you agreed to join this. And before we sign off, any final thoughts that you want to share with everyone?
No, I think the final thought might just be for those of you that are working on the things that Amir and I have talked about. If you're truly following your passion, if what you're working on you were solving for fixing a problem that you personally believe deep down inside needs to be solved, keep pursuing it. Don't drain your bank account to zero, but keep going. If instead you were trying to solve for, I want to start a startup, and you just tried to find a problem that could be solved, I'm nervous. It's going to be a painful journey. Hopefully, you find success. If you don't, then the next time you try it, try and follow a passion. What's the fire in your belly of a problem you need to solve would be kind of a final parting thought.
Awesome. I love that. Follow the fire in your belly.
Yep.
And where can we all find you?
Well, you can find me at Capital Factory at some event that's happening. There's events almost every day. Or you can find me through my content at shockwaveinnovations.com.
All right. Awesome. Gordon, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Very welcome.